spanning the entire globe, involving hundreds of different cultures, explaining the same phenomenon by different names.
The nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness, those aspects that are extremely compelling.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bigfoot Influencers podcast. I'm Dina Halloran and this is
Tim Halloran.
And we are so excited to have you join us today. I mean, obviously spring's coming and so everybody's happy and walking around and being outside and seeing things. And so our guest today is actually a super cool dude with a super cool name. I mean, who can beat Robby Vegas?
Right.
I mean, that was just cool. I love that. He's a rock star. But anyway, so Tim, why don't you tell everybody about Robbie?
I will. So I'll let him do most of it.
Oh, obviously.
But Robbie's he's just a fascinating person. He's a musician. He's a professional wrestler. He is has his own podcast that which is really cool. I've listened. We'll talk about the podcast a little bit today, and then we'll get into some Bigfoot stuff.
He sounds like a busy guy.
Oh my God, I don't know how he has time for it all. So.
I know. Thank God he made time for us.
Right. So
that's great.
Super excited and honored to have him on the show.
Yay!
So let's bring Robbie in.
Welcome, Robbie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
We're excited to have you, Robbie. So you're not like like you had a Bigfoot experience, but you're not like a researcher or anything like that, but you're a pretty cool dude that has a lot of other stuff going on too. So I don't know, where should we start with this?
I think for the audience, can they maybe what was Robbie like growing up when he's a little kid?
Oh,
Let's just start there.
Okay.
Oh, well, kind of like I am now. I was super into rock and roll. I was super into professional wrestling, and I was huge into horror movies, and those things have never changed. So growing up, my uncle gave me a couple of Kiss and Beatles records, and after that was it. It was life-changing. And then, you're flipping through the station one day and you see Macho Man, and all of a sudden you're a professional wrestling fan, and watching Jaws turned me into a horror nut. And I kind of grew up with all three of those things never leaving me.
So, I mean, was that because were you growing up in that era, or was it your uncles passing that down to you?
They passed it down. I actually got from there. Kiss kicked the door down for me, and then I became huge into like 80s hair metal and stuff like that. So,
okay, cool. That's so
Motley
awesome.
Crue and Poison and Cinderella and Vixen and all those bands. It was like, oh yeah, that's my stuff. Yeah,
well, because that's what we grew up with, Tim and I.
Yeah.
So we just we love that it's coming back.
And the 80s, I think, are such the most unique era of music, of such diversity, and probably the coolest. I mean, there's a lot of cool eras of music, but I think the 80s.
70s is probably the second best.
It's
hard to go. It's hard to shuffle between the two. But even the 90s, like especially the early 90s had some cool stuff going on too, like Robbie was saying.
But the 80s just had everything.
Yeah.
It did. 80s music and the musicians in the 80s were insanely talented. It was hard to find a band that didn't have a shredding guitar player and an amazing lead singer. So.
Yep. You're so right. You were so right. And we had so many of these amazing artists packed into those 10 years that from so many different genres. I mean, think about even Kenny G, like a freaking clarinet player got freaking like world famous. I mean, it really was like an era of, Boy George and Madonna. And I mean, so yes, Robbie, we love you already.
Well, if I could steal a line from Mark Weiss, it was the decade that rocked.
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was
definitely.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
So then you got really influenced by all of this music and just the whole culture of those decades. So did that inspire the music that you play today?
It did, yeah. I started playing music, and I say professionally because I started getting paid to play when I was 13. So I
Ooh.
actually got into my first bands when I was 13, and I was playing all through my teenage years, and I was in clubs and bars and places that I had no business being because I wasn't old enough to be there. But because I was in the band, I was there, and I did that for many years, and I still play. I just had a show a couple nights ago, but yeah,
Because Robbie,
yeah,
what's your instrument of choice that we're talking about?
I play guitar and I'm also a singer.
Okay,
And I
okay.
write all my own music, and
Mhm.
and I do covers and stuff too. But the music I release is obviously all my own, and I'm out there on Apple and Spotify and Amazon Music and all that stuff. But yeah, I still do it to this day.
That is so cool. That is so
Hmm.
super cool. So then, you're in, so basically that's your life. Like
Hmm.
that's what you do. That's your life passion and that's your career and the whole thing like that. But how did you get into pro wrestling?
Well, I was a lifelong fan, and I never
Mhm.
really knew how guys got to like WWE and stuff like that. I just assumed that, like, I don't know, like all of a sudden these guys are plucked from like college or wherever. And then I found out there was an independent wrestling scene, and I started doing my research. I started going to some shows, and then I was in the gym. And this guy came up to me and he said I was pushing a lot of weight for somebody my size. And he asked if I ever thought about getting into professional wrestling. And I was like, yeah, all the time. So he took me
That's
to a
so
school, and I went, and I actually didn't like the first school that I went to. I took a few classes, and I was like, I don't know about that. And then I found a place that I really liked, and I was trained by a guy named Brian Jennings, and he really got me going. I trained under him for about a year. I started getting booked on shows, and I took some seminars, and fast forward 13 years, I've been doing this for that long now. I'm a multiple stroke, multiple time champion in a bunch of different promotions. I've wrestled in many states, and I still do wrestle up in Canada. And I actually am one of the head trainers at my own wrestling school at this point.
Whoa, dude,
Wow.
you are busy.
So you just
Very.
never no experience, and obviously if you were in a gym, you were into, exercise and
Mhm.
being fit, but no previous wrestling experience, just
Nothing.
Here's what's
an
really
athlete.
funny though is when that guy tapped on your shoulder and asked you that question and you said yes, Tim giggled. You know why he giggled? Because I think any man in the gym being tapped on the shoulder and say, have you ever thought about pro wrestling? Every guy's like, yes, I have.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
So,
was wild too, and I did end up
mhm.
recognizing him afterwards from a show that I saw on the independent scene. So it was kind of one of those things. He, used to paint his face and stuff. So at first I was talking to him, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I know who you are." So it kind of like clicked. So
A-
That's so cool.
And another thing about the 80s. Now, wrestling's had their different eras, but the 80s wrestling scene was pretty cool too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh,
yes.
my little brother Ricky, he was obsessed. And
Still
that's
is.
back in the day when
Yeah.
we had like one TV in the house and you actually had to fight for it, Like I call watching something at 8 o'clock, like you had
Yeah.
to yeah. But yeah, he was obsessed. And so of course, because there was no other TV in the house, I'm gonna obviously sit there and watch it with him.
Mhm, mhm.
But yeah, he loved all those guys.
Yeah. So how often are you wrestling?
Constantly. I actually just had a show last night. I defended my tag team titles last night, and it's basically just about every weekend. Sometimes multiple times per during the week. During the weekends, it could be one match, it could be two matches, it could be three matches. Like I don't know what that week's going to hold. I know my April is jam packed from beginning to end, so it's gonna be
Wow.
multiple times a week. So
That is so
Yeah,
cool.
and I guess you still have your title.
I am a tag team champion for one company. I'm a heavyweight champion for another company, and I recently won a Wrestler of the Year award for 2023.
What? That is
Congratulations
so
for that.
exciting for you. Oh my God.
So you live in the Northeast, though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so when you're wrestling, though, are you usually in the Northeast? I mean, you mentioned Canada, but
Um,
I mean,
yes and no, depending. Different points in my career brought different areas, but yeah, I mean, I was a tag team champion out in Indiana for a while. I'm going to be going soon out to Michigan, working for a new company out there. Or they're not a new company; it's a new company for me. So it really just depends on where I get asked to go, where the offers are coming in from, and if it makes sense for me to go, in a financial sense. So.
Okay, Robbie. So here you are, a musician, a podcaster, a professional wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And how does all of this tie into Bigfoot? How do you tie into Bigfoot?
I had a few experiences, but one was really standing out, and it was actually on a wrestling trip we were on.
Can we talk about years? Like, what year was this?
2017 or 18.
Okay. Okay. So pretty recent.
Yeah. Pretty recent. Yeah. And I was always into Bigfoot. Like even as a kid, I remember being super fascinated by Bigfoot documentaries and, Discovery Channel. And it turned into a fascination for cryptozoology in general, like Dogman and all that stuff. But I was wrestling in Vermont. So we were driving. It was an 8-hour ride. And there was me and 2 other wrestlers that got booked on the show. And we grabbed our rental SUV and we were headed out. And we got to Vermont and we had our show and everything was good. And on the way there, we hit an area which I believe was still in New York. I think it was White Plains, New York, but they're known for Bigfoot sightings. I'd actually seen a documentary on this place and I was in heaven. I was like, this place is great. They had a Bigfoot statue in the middle of the town and there was all these souvenir shops and they were getting ready for like a Bigfoot festival that they have every year. And the other 2 guys in the car were like freaked out by it. And I was in heaven. I was like, this is cool, man. If we had time, I would say pull over because I want to shop around these souvenir stores, So we hit this area a little farther out, more towards Vermont. It was somewhere between White Plains and where we were going in Vermont. And we called it the dead zone because there was nothing. There was no radio. Our cell phones weren't working. There was no street lights. There was no houses. It was just a strip of like nothing for like 30 minutes, which during the day was fine. But then we had our show. All right, let's start heading back because we had another show the night after in Pennsylvania. So we were coming back through and we hit the dead zone and everything was off. And me being me messing with these guys, I pull out my phone, I turn on the flashlight and I'm just being funny. I wasn't being serious. We're looking for Bigfoot and I'm shining the light around and we come around this bend and we had the brights on and we just see this massive creature standing on the edge of the road in the tree line. There's a boulder next to it, which really put into perspective how big it was because this was a pretty big boulder. Like this boulder was huge and it came up to maybe this thing's hip if we're lucky. And I was just like, oh my God, I turned, I dropped my phone, literally fell with the flashlight still on. The driver sat up. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on the show, so I'm not going to say what he said.
Are we allowed to swear?
Within reason.
Well, you can say like effing or
effing.
Yeah,
he basically sat up and said, "What the f?" And then the guy in the back seat sat up and went, "Whoa!" And as soon as the lights hit it, we see it. It sees us. It turns sideways, takes 2 massive steps, disappears into the woods. And we kind of didn't say anything at first. We're in the dead zone. Our cell phones are not working. The radio's not working. There's no streetlights, which is why we have the brights on. And this thing was on 2 legs. And it was gray. And I was just like, I can't believe it. So I'm staring straight ahead. And we're driving. And nobody's saying anything at first. And then radio clicks back on. Cell service comes back. And finally I said, what did we all just see? Because I wanted to make sure we saw the exact same thing. So we all gave a different detail just to make sure we were on the same page. And I was like, I think we saw Bigfoot. And not too long later, we drove through, White Plains. And, I was like, stop, I got to take a picture of this Bigfoot statue. And they were like, no, that thing could be following us. And, but they did stop for me and I did take a picture of it, which I do have still. But it was really wild to see something like that in person.
Yeah. So first of all, like the dead zone, it's like an X-Files episode.
Right.
Like it's awesome. Like, and the crazy part is that you're already thinking, knowing, just being aware of the Bigfoot phenomenon itself, you're thinking to yourself because you're joking around with your friends, you're thinking, this is like a perfect habitat for a Sasquatch because nobody's here.
Mhm.
There's not even any signal here. There's nothing here. So I remember the first time I went to Ohio was to go to his cousin's
Oh yeah.
wedding. And we're driving on this road in Ohio that is just to get to our house. That's just, it's like dirt.
Gravel, dirt, yeah.
And for a long time, we're not talking like a little drive. No, it was a while. And I was like, all of a sudden, just getting this feeling like this is like where a Bigfoot would live. Not knowing at that time that Ohio, like south or east of the Mississippi, Ohio is probably the biggest sighting evidence hotspot.
Mhm.
Not even knowing that, I felt so, dude. I feel you on that. I totally feel you on that.
Yeah, it was wild. It was one of those things because we drove through that little area that's known for Bigfoot sightings that it was just stuck in my head for the night. So like when we
Yeah.
came back through there, I was like, and I knew they were freaked out to begin with, so I was kind of picking on them, and I was, and then there it was, and I was like, oh my god.
Did they think maybe you were hoaxing them?
No, because it was pretty apparent that I was freaked out because, like I
And
said, I
also,
turned and was like, froze.
So,
okay.
what other features can you describe?
Yeah. First of all, sorry for that. How far away were we
Yeah.
from the sighting? Would you say?
Oh, so we came around a bend. So
Yeah.
when we came, if you could picture, you see the tree line, the woods, and all that on the edge of
Yeah.
the road. The headlights, which were the brights, because there was no street lights, so the brights were on. So it was very bright if you got in
The
that
high beams.
gleam. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it came around, and as it passed over, that's when we saw it. So it was like oh my God, as we were turning. But I
Mhm.
would say it couldn't have been any more than 30 or 40 feet away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you surprise it
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mhm.
boom, it's so like, did you get a glimpse of the face?
Yes, but everything was so fast. Like I saw a giant man covered in hair, essentially. The face
Mhm.
was also covered in hair, minus like around the eyes.
Mhm.
So like around the eyes, and like I could see a nose, and I could make out like a very human-like mouth, but very like a lot of hair around it. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
like it
Mhm.
was it was essentially all hair, and I noticed that the
Mhm.
hands, probably right down to like the fingers, were very hairy as well. But it
Mhm.
was very clearly like man-like hands. But everything happened within like a 7-second span. So it was like we
Mhm.
saw it, we freaked out. The high beams were on it. It turned, took 2 giant steps, and disappeared.
And so because a lot of people, if you see a Sasquatch depicted in AI or
Mm-hmm.
cartoon, they always give them a monkey face or a gorilla face. So
Yeah.
so your feeling, Robbie, was this was not a gorilla face; it was a human face.
Yeah, it had a human-like nose,
Mhm.
a little bit
And you said
wider, but
human lips because a lot of times gorillas don't really have
Right.
lips. So were
yeah,
you noticing more of like a lip, like a human being?
in in a glance. So I can't really tell
Mhm.
you for sure because again, like the whole thing was seconds and then it turned sideways. But in a
Right.
glance, I could tell that there was, whatever a human-like, not saying it was exactly human, but like a human-like
Mhm.
mouth, but there was so much hair around it that it
Mhm.
could be distorted or mistaken for not being. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I mean, because I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting, and I think that sometimes that's something we really need to separate is that, is this an ape-like bipedal
Mhm.
creature or is it a human-like bipedal creature? So
Yeah.
what would you say to that, Robbie, after your sighting?
Um, I would say it was exactly in the middle. I
Okay.
think it was perfectly both. It was
Mm,
really,
mm,
it wasn't disproportionate or anything. It was just huge,
mhm,
you know?
mhm, mhm. So
So
that's another thing.
Right. So I want to ask, because you and your uh partners in the car will
mhm.
say, you guys are used to seeing from your profession, you can pretty much size up because you're sizing people up all the time. What
Yeah.
would you say? I mean, what broad shoulders, how big, what else can you say about that?
I think I remember guessing at the time that it was somewhere around 8 feet.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
And like, what would you like besides just its height? You mentioned it was huge. Like, are we talking like just everything was huge?
Yeah. Yeah. Wide shoulders.
Really wide
Yeah.
shoulders.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say the only thing that was like disproportionate, quote unquote, about it was the arms were a lot longer than like a human's arms would be, as you know, as you would assume proportionately they would be for somebody that big. But other than that, it looked like the hairiest guy in the world.
How did it move? You said when it took 2 steps and walk. Can you describe that?
The best description I could give of it was smooth. Like it turned and took these 2 steps that just it almost looked like it could float away. It was just the smooth, like boom, boom, 2 steps, but the steps were so long that it only took those 2 steps to disappear. But it was just this very smooth transition of like, it's not like it was in a panic. It didn't run away. It didn't freak out at the high beams and like, it just turned sideways. Like it was just another day.
Like,
yeah, right. right. It was like another day at the office. Like it was
around
leave me alone.
Just get out of here.
Yeah. and I want to say too, it was very late at night. So it was probably like, it was pitch black outside and it had to be somewhere between 11 and 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was like, it just turned and just boom, boom, gone. Just the smooth transition into nothing.
Yeah. You hear people say they look like they're gliding. That's how smooth they are.
That's what it looked like.
Or skis or something, you hear that a lot.
Yeah, I think too, it's probably shocking for us to see something bipedal that moves so easily in an outdoor setting, as opposed to us just walking on our carpet and hard floors. That probably adds to the effect of gracefulness as they're moving, as they're comfortable in it.
Yeah.
Were your windows down? Did you smell or hear anything?
Windows were not down. And
what was the season, Robbie?
That's a good question. I actually don't remember. I know there was no snow on the ground.
But I mean, you're in Vermont, so it's going to be cool no matter what time of the year is, right?
Yeah, I honestly can't remember. I'm gonna have to look back and see if I still have my my schedule that far back. But I really can't remember. I just remember it being like, a chill night. I was in the car, but I had a t-shirt on.
Okay, so it could have been like just a warmer weather season. So
it could have been. It could have been. I mean, also I'm in the car with 3 other guys who just got done wrestling. It could have just been I'm sweating, but
you're happy to be in an old car.
Yeah, exactly. It could have absolutely been that too. So
right.
I'll have to see if I could dig that up and find it.
So you were already kind of interested in Bigfoot.
Yes.
What are these other guys like? So do you still keep in contact with them? Did you guys talk about this?
I still see one of them from time to time. He still wrestles here and there, not as frequently as I do, but they wanted nothing to do with it, are not interested in it, are terrified by it. I'm the paranormal cryptozoology guy. Like I'm into ghost stories and Dogman and Bigfoot and Jersey Devil and all that stuff. So to them, they were like, don't bring that around me.
But what did you guys do right after, after you took your picture in White Plains, and then what happened?
We floored it.
That is...
We floored it. No, but
you guys were really freaked out.
Yeah, it was really scary because my first thought was the 2 strides that it took were massive. And as we drove past it and boom, and it walks off, and we drive past the area that it walked off, I was looking in the mirrors because I was like, if this thing started running, it could catch us because we're on a winding road in pitch black with the high beams on. We can't go very fast because if we do, we're going off the road. And if we go off the road, I don't know if these things are dangerous. I don't know if we look like food, so I'm looking in the mirror.
Amazing how you go from like being interested in Bigfoot and then you have the actual experience. And at that point, you don't care that you're interested. You're like, you start thinking about, am I going to get killed here?
Right.
Is it
exactly.
Eat me?
Right, because you hear conflicting stories of Bigfoot are friendly, Bigfoot are dangerous, right? I've read a lot of books on it. I've watched a lot of documentaries and things like that. And there are conflicting stories. So in my mind, I'm like, theoretically, if this thing starts running, it could see better in the dark than we can, I'm sure. And we don't know when the next twist or turn is coming. So it's not like we could hit 80, 90, 100 miles an hour without hurting ourselves. So I'm looking, going, if this thing is angry and it starts running, what are we going to do? We have no cell service. The radio's not working. And if we crash this car, we're going to be in the dark in the woods, you know?
See, this is, you know, I don't know, you know, this for me is a good witness.
3 of them. 3
Yeah,
witnesses.
because you have multiple people. You remember what's going through your mind, like you're putting aside the fact that you're interested in Bigfoot so much to the point where, you know, you're like, because the value of your life and living through the situation is more important. Yeah, because you know, we've talked to some researchers who've run toward them. But yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Here's a little twist to the story too, is one of the guys brought his girlfriend along on this trip and she slept through the whole thing.
That would be me.
Did she believe you guys when she woke up?
I think the fear in our faces, especially mine, because I was known as like, well, he's the guy who will go to a haunted place on purpose. So to see that I was like freaked out, I think she did. Yeah. But she slept through the whole thing for like hours. Like 3 hours later, she got up and she was like, we were still talking about it. And she was like, what happened?
Could you?
That's crazy. Yeah, you would miss it. So
the road crossing?
I know.
You just, you know.
Well, that's when most people see him.
I think that's the number one sighting.
Or more.
And what's awesome is it's, you know, it could be anybody. It could be a pro wrestler coming back from a, you know, an event, and now
they're not biased to who's seeing him.
Exactly. Normally it's like hikers, you know, whatever, hunters, fishermen, people are always out in the woods, but the road crossings are the best.
Yes, and I do have a hiking Bigfoot story as well.
Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, we're gonna get into that, but I got one more question to ask about this. So who'd you tell first after you know, that night, or I bet you were amped up for a while too. So who'd you tell first about it?
God, you know what? I really don't remember. I really don't.
Well, I mean, you talked about it probably a lot with the guys that were in the car.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part, with the 3 of us talked about it, I think we told other wrestlers actually, like, "Hey, man, coming home last night, like, you never, you know," and they were like, "Where are you coming from?" And it was like that whole thing, and like some of them were like, "Wow, that's wild. I'm really into that," and some of them were like, "You were exhausted. You have no idea what you saw."
All 3 of you saw the exact same thing, exhausted.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Do you ever go back to that spot?
Actually, that was the last time I wrestled in Vermont. So,
oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a great experience. I haven't been. No, I plan to. Yes.
Is Vermont like a big? I mean, it looks like a squatchy area. I've never been to Vermont. I mean, I'm wondering, like, do they have like a Bigfoot community there of researchers and stuff like that?
I'm not sure because, like I said, the White Plains area was New York, but it's not far from where we're going in Vermont.
Oh, okay, right.
And then I honestly can't recall if we were still in Vermont or had already crossed over into New York at that point. But I know we weren't far from White Plains where all the sightings are, because it wasn't that long after that we came across the statue of Bigfoot.
Okay.
But so we were in the general area of that statue. At least within a half hour, maybe a little bit more. My time frame is skewed now because it's been years, and I've told the story so many times that now I'm even questioning my own timeline. But Vermont itself, like, I know we drove past like a beautiful ski resort and you know, things like that. And the whole time after we drove past that you know, the Bigfoot souvenir shops and stuff, I was like, I could totally see this being like because there were so many wooded areas and like ski resorts, and it was just like, yeah, I could see that.
That's pretty cool. So then, okay, so can we hear his next story now?
Sure.
Thank you. So what's your next story, Robbie?
Well, the next story actually happened first, and I was it was a few years before this one. Okay. Yeah. So I was hiking, and I was in a place in the Lewiston, New York area, which is not far from Niagara Falls. Actually, the gorge I was hiking in was connected to the Niagara River, and it's a dangerous hike. It's called Devil's Hole. And so I was hiking in Devil's Hole.
Were you
and
alone?
I was alone, yeah.
Okay.
And I came across a footprint, a giant footprint, but it looked like a man's foot, but big. But at the top where the toes are, there was like points, almost like there was like long toenails, or like, I don't want to say claws, but like long toenails or something. You know what I mean? There's like little points. And it was big. Like I wear a size 11, and it was bigger than mine. I was like, okay, this is pretty big footprint. And I kind of like bent over and looked at it, and it had like a fresher look to it, you know. It's, you know, I'm walking on the path straight ahead, and there's an incline here where there's like trees and such, and then there's a drop off here where if you fall, you're basically falling into the Niagara River and you're going to get swept away. So I'm standing on the edge of that, and I'm looking at this, and there's these I don't even know what to call them, but they almost look like small cherries, like on the trees. And as I'm bent over looking at this, one hits me in the side of the face. But it didn't hit me like it came down, because there was nothing over me. It diagonally came at me from this slope. And the first one hit me, and I didn't think anything of it, because you're hiking, like stuff's going to hit you in the face, stuff falls out of trees.
Yeah, it bounced off a tree, or
Yeah. And then it does it again, and it comes down like directly, like slanted, like sideways, and it hits me again.
That's
and then
a pretty
another
good
one
throw.
hit me. And I'm like looking, and now I'm starting to think of like stories that I've read, and I'm like, I have this footprint in front of me, just one. It's not like there was multiple. It had rained a few days before, so I think it was just like a wet patch around like dry, you know, so it must have sunk in just at that one spot. And it's just that one print, and now I'm getting hit with these things coming diagonally at me instead of falling down from a tree. And I'm like, something about this doesn't seem right. So I cannot confirm whether this was a Bigfoot experience. All I know is that I saw this giant footprint that had like these weird claws, and that I started getting pelted with these things. And then I turned around and hiked like a mile back and went back up to my car.
Yeah.
And I did some research about the area, and it turns out that area had Bigfoot sightings. And I was like, I had no idea prior to this. It's probably about a 45-minute drive from my house to get to this area to hike. So
it's
not like
considered New York? Like,
yes, it is. Lewiston, New York.
Oh, okay.
And then, again, not far from Niagara Falls. But after doing some research, there have been many Bigfoot sightings in that area and in that Devil's Hole Gorge for hikers. And prior to this, and I'd hiked there before. I'd probably hiked there about 4 or 5 times prior. It wasn't my first time there. And I still had no idea that these stories existed. So when I went back and did my research, I was like, oh my God, maybe I had an experience. I definitely saw a footprint. So
I'm wondering, I'm curious. So, I mean, they have this horrible name for it, Devil's Gorge. I mean, were there lots of hikers dying, falling, like you said, you could have fallen into the river and been swept away? Or is it just because it's such hard terrain and,
that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a tough hike. And then, but when you get down to the end of the hike, you're down like pretty much you could sit on these rocks and put your feet in the Niagara River, and there's like a big whirlpool down there. It's really beautiful. It's dangerous there. Yeah.
But you were planning on continuing your hike and then decided to turn around?
I turned around. Yeah. I got after I saw that, I was like, I don't know. I was by myself, and I was like,
Yeah.
Double time, right?
That's funny. Like, that's funny how like the reality hits you. Like, even in your other story. I love that. Like, you're just like, I don't care if it's big, but we're getting the hell out of here. That thing's big and I'm scared.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Who knows how people will react until you're faced with that situation.
Right. And again, I remember stories of like, we had these Bigfoot encounters and they were throwing rocks, or they were, and I'm thinking like, am I getting pelted? And again, I don't even know what these things were. They look like little cherries. I don't know what to call them.
Yeah,
but,
or they could have been like holly trees. They have little red berries, especially up north.
They could have been, like, again, I'm not like this big outdoorsman who knows like all this stuff. I'm just like, I don't know. I got hit with something that looked like a little cherry.
Yeah.
Here's something interesting, Robbie. Those aren't heavy like rocks.
No.
So you know what that means. It's pretty dang close to you.
Yeah,
Right.
and to be able to hit you on the face a couple of
Yeah.
times in a row,
Yeah.
that's pretty
Probably
amazing
like, let me
too.
screw with this guy.
Because I don't know if I could do that from that far away. Like really, like even 6 foot away, tried to hit somebody in the face with a little berry, so.
Yeah. And it was hard too, because there's a lot of trees. So as I'm looking up the slope, I'm trying
Mhm.
to look and see if I could see anything. And obviously, I don't. And then you start listening, like, am I hearing like breaking branches or something? But there's a breeze down there by the water, so the branches are moving, and you can't see anything. You can't tell if there's any awkward sounds or anything like that. So you almost feel like a sitting duck. Like, and then I'm thinking, like, if I slip down this slope, I'm going in the Niagara River, like, or if this thing runs at me and I panic, if there's even
Mhm.
anything there, I don't know. All I know is I'm
Yeah.
standing next to this giant footprint and things are hitting me. So
Yeah, and you're alone.
yeah.
That's a huge thing. I mean, obviously being a woman, unfortunately, don't have a lot of experience in hiking alone just for safety reasons.
Mhm.
But dude, I mean, you're by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, if a Bigfoot wanted to snatch you up and break your head off and throw you in the river, nobody would know what really happened to you.
Right. And
You know what
I'm a
I'm saying?
professional wrestler.
That's why I was asking you if people died there, because who knows? He's
Mhm.
I mean, there could be people that's plucking them and throw them in the water and boom. You know what I'm
Yeah, I
saying? They
mean,
go,
I mean, I would assume that there was, some things that have happened down there. If I did some
Mhm.
research, I could probably tell you. But like, I'm a professional wrestler. Like, I've seen some pretty big guys. I've been in the ring with some pretty big guys. And what I
Mhm.
saw on that drive from Vermont back, home, was nothing like anybody I've ever stood across from. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a great question on your part, that, with his wrestling experience, he's
Mhm.
used to looking at something and sizing it up and thinking, how strong is this person, or how, flexible are they, or how do they move,
So
so
you pick up things.
you're a really good witness, Robbie, like a really good witness. So, so I'm sorry, go ahead, honey.
You had something else that happened though. You said you had a few experiences.
those are my two Bigfoot experiences. My other
Okay.
experiences were paranormal. Yeah.
Okay.
She's thinking about it.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you
No.
are.
Okay, fine, I am. But we're gonna stick to Bigfoot. We're gonna stick to Bigfoot. So I mean, I'm just like, so you didn't go back, but because the first one was kind of like an indication that could have been a Bigfoot. So
Yeah.
when you had your second Bigfoot experience, did that obviously that solidified things for you, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, how is it, because we've never seen a Sasquatch before, but obviously we're doing this and we are talking to people constantly about their experience. And, and you said before that you had researched a little bit if they could be violent,
Yes.
like give it, because we don't hear a lot of information about that. So what have you found in your research on that subject?
I read a few books on Bigfoot. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the names are, because it was at the time when I was using like the Kindle, the e-reader, and
Right.
it's all these cryptozoology books and boom, boom, boom. But I've heard of
Mhm.
people being chased, and
Mm.
obviously they got away to tell their story. But it makes you wonder, like, what if they got caught? Like, what
Mhm.
happens? What do they
Mm.
do? Because you hear, like, these, I saw one when I was fishing and he was crouched down by the water. And when he saw me, he let out this shrill and then like took off after me. And like, I've read stories like that where it's like,
Mhm.
oh my God, like, what if it didn't just give up? Like, it almost like chased them out of the area and then just stopped chasing them. And it's like, was that like a scare tactic? Like, get out of here. This is where I live.
Yeah,
Or
that's
like,
what I think, Robbie.
yeah, yeah.
Because just like you explained with his gracefulness and his stepping, going off, to hide.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure if a Bigfoot wanted to catch one of us, it wouldn't take very long.
Right. And
So
that,
yeah,
but
so
then,
he was probably bluff charging, but just wanted to do more of a pushing out kind of thing as a
yes,
way. That's what
yes.
my thought. But I mean, have you heard any other situations where Sasquatches have been violent towards people?
I read a story that I don't know if it was true or not, that
Okay.
a family was camping and one of their children was taken by a Sasquatch. Um,
Okay.
I don't know how true it
And
was.
brought back?
They went and got like I don't want to call it a rescue team, but more like a search party. And they went and got the kid back. And I guess he was pretty banged up, which makes you wonder, like, what happened, and he doesn't remember. So,
Right.
you know, you hear stuff like that, and then couple that with how many people disappear while they're hiking every year. And it makes you wonder, like, if Bigfoot's out there, could that be something? You know,
Because even if it wasn't on purpose, do you know what I mean? Kind of like
Right,
the
right.
Yeti and Bugs Bunny, or do you remember? I don't know. It
remember
might
that.
be a little too. Is that a little too old for you, Robbie?
No, I
Do you
remember
know,
that.
like, and he was like, I
I know.
want to love him and squeeze him.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that could happen with us too. If they found one of us, they could want to keep us. And
Let's not.
okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
let's not. No, I said let's not put ourselves someone in that situation and say, oh, yeah, they love me. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying that who knows if there
Right.
was like a teenager Bigfoot and they
Right.
saw a person, and they were like, oh, what is this? And, you know, accidentally
them too
killed
hard,
it,
yeah.
you know, but
Yeah, no, a lot of questions. Yeah.
yeah, there are a lot of questions.
Mhm.
So we always, so now now you do a podcast as
Yeah.
well. So what is the name of your podcast?
All bets are off with Robby Vegas.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and it's got the abbreviations, which is really cool too.
Yeah, that's super cool. So like, what is the theme of your podcast? What are you generally talking about?
So the three topics that I brought up earlier. So we talk about horror movies, rock and roll, and professional wrestling. And most of the podcast is interviews. So the bulk of what I do are interviews. So, and I've had on, you know, a lot of big name rock stars, wrestlers, and things like that. And when we're not doing interviews, we'll do, you know, album reviews and breakdowns, special horror movie stuff for Halloween time, you know, things like that. But, you know, we've had on Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, you know, Ace Von Johnson from LA Guns. I've had just about every member of Vixen, you know, Richie Kotzen, who's, you know, a great, phenomenal solo artist, but also a part of Poison and Mr. Big and stuff like that. A lot of horror movie actors and actresses like Felissa Rose. And this coming weekend, I have Demolition Smash, WWE legend, coming on the show. So, yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Have you had any Bigfoot people on?
I did not have specifically a Bigfoot person on. I did have an author on who wrote a book called The Pine Barrens Devil, which is a bunch of short stories about the Jersey Devil. That was really cool. That was Lee Painter, very talented. And yeah, we had her on, and that was cool. But we haven't had any like, you know, Bigfoot experts or anything like that yet.
Well, there's no experts. Yeah, we'll have to.
Yep, not yet.
So Robbie, are you 100% convinced then that they exist?
I personally am. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I always say if when I do interviews, because there's people out there that are not convinced. So to keep them listening, I always play devil's advocate. And it's like, if they're out there, but in my mind, they're definitely out there.
Well, I think once you see it, and especially if you have other people with you to confirm that you didn't just hallucinate, that's deep. Just even without even telling your story and caring if other people believe you. I think if you're all by yourself, you might actually question yourself and be like, did I just see that? But you had two people confirm that you saw that. So that's the thing right there. So once you have that kind of situation, how can you not believe?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I don't know if you guys know, but that's how I ended up on the Confessionals podcast, which I actually had Tony, the host of the Confessionals, on my show too, which obviously we know is a giant podcast for paranormal and cryptozoology stuff. Very, very popular. But he would
almost
be
as popular as ours, of course.
Almost. Yeah. He's like this close.
Almost,
we have to keep beating him down.
I know it. But
hey,
he's probably the closest thing.
So he's a little
Please.
tough.
I lived in Philly.
I know you did.
I
So
can handle my own, honey.
Tony's probably the closest thing I've had on to like an expert in that kind of field. And obviously we talked, you know, Bigfoot and stuff like that. But you know, I ended up on that show because the story is such a wild story that like once he like caught wind of it, he was like, we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so what do you think they are? Just
like being a normal Robby Vegas, because you're not normal, but you know what I'm saying. Like what in your opinion, what do you think they are?
In my personal opinion, I consider them the missing link. I'm not sure I quite buy into the interdimensional being, the alien, the teleportation stuff, and that's why we can't find them. I honestly just think they're a missing link. I think they're highly intelligent. So I think that's why if they don't want to be seen, they won't be. And the times that we have seen them, it was pure luck, pure coincidence, and pure accident. It's not because they walked behind a tree and walked into a portal to another dimension. You know, like that stuff to me gets a little far fetched, but I know there's Bigfoot people out there who are probably mad at me for saying that, but
you have your opinion, honey. Yeah, everybody has a right to their opinion. So missing link, are you thinking maybe it's another human species probably, or that you know, like, you know how when, you know, I think we might have like what 13 or 14 documented fossils of different types of hominid. Is that the right word?
I think so,
yeah. So do you think it's something like that, Robbie?
Yeah, I think that's more where I lean towards. I think more closer to primate than human, but yes, definitely like some sort of missing link. And when I say missing link, I'm not discrediting religion or anything by any means when I say that. I just want to clarify that, because to me that doesn't discredit religion. That just means there's another creation out there, you know. So
that we haven't known about.
Exactly. And I got
and also you can also believe in something we learned about last weekend. Was microevolution, that, you know, people, you know, like could have been a person, a couple of people who got lost in the woods and didn't, you know, just had to mini evolve into something bigger and warmer, and you know what I'm saying? So it could be a lot of stuff.
It absolutely could be. The fact that I think, I don't know. I don't know why I lean towards primate. Probably just because of the size. They almost, or at least from what the one I saw in person was, it was huge and it was muscular. So to me, it's like, you know, they just have this naturally built muscular frame. They just happen to walk more upright, but it gives you like gorilla vibes. But it almost looks like just a really hairy man. It's crazy. You know?
Yeah.
Wow. Have you, since then, or maybe even since your first experience, have you talked to any other musicians or wrestlers that have had experiences?
I can't think of any off the top of my head that have had experience, but I've definitely talked to a bunch that are into it. Like, it's actually pretty fascinating how many musicians and wrestlers are like, yeah, man, me too. You know, like I believe in that stuff, because you know, you don't know who's going to believe it. I know I had recently on my podcast, I had Chris Dolliver on, who's the bass player for Madam X, and he's super into it. So he wanted me to tell the story on my podcast to him as we were talking about it, just because he wanted to hear it as I'm interviewing him. He's like, no, you have to tell the story.
That's, I mean, you know, like no matter, whose podcast you go on to, I mean, they're going to want to probably hear that Bigfoot story, because, you know, I think everybody at the end of the day is fascinated about the unknown. And even a lot of religions all agree that there's just some things that we don't know about.
I think, and honestly though, I'd rather have a Bigfoot experience than a Dogman experience. So I'm, I feel,
because that's a, you know,
that's scary,
less friendly.
I don't know. We don't know, I guess.
I mean, obviously being in the Bigfoot world, we certainly have spoken to people who have had sightings, but you know, where would you say, Robbie, that where you live, because you're up in the northeast, I mean, are we considered the northeast?
I am.
We're like mid-Atlantic more, I guess.
I'm considered northeast, but
okay. So do you live in a squatchy area?
Well, personally, no, but I'd say with that 45-minute drive being to Lewiston, where there's been plenty of sightings, like if you look at it that way, I'm not too far from an area where there's been sightings. But I'm not far from Buffalo. So it's not very, like, you know, there's a lot of places here to hike for sure, but not a lot of places that I'm going to hear about sightings and stuff like that until I went up to that Lewiston, Niagara area.
Wow. Right. Did you report your sighting to anywhere? I'd like to. Okay.
I did not. You know, and it never even crossed my mind to do so. You know, like the sightings that I read from that area were reported to, like, you know, park rangers and, you know, things like that. But it would make sense that there'd be different creatures out there, though, because there's, you know, the flowing river right there, and there's obviously, you know, plenty of food with like berries and, you know, whatever. So it's like an area where animals can thrive. So I wouldn't. You know, it's not shocking that there could be something out there.
Right.
And places to hide. You know?
Easily.
So do you think You think we'll have proof soon for the the common scientist? Do you think that's coming down the road?
I actually do. I do think so. I think it's
Mhm.
only a matter of time before we just say, okay, this is going on the books. Just kind of like the giant squid. You know what I mean? Like there was
Mhm.
like sightings, and everybody was like, "You're nuts." And then finally, one washes up on the shore, and you're like, "Oh, okay, now we have to eat our words." Um,
Mhm.
I do remember
So
reading
I do
something.
think we knew before one
Well,
washed up.
the Doug, so the producer of our show, Doug
Yeah.
Hychek, is the one who
Got the
the
first film
film of it
coverage of it.
in its
Oh wow.
habitat. But
Yeah.
I don't know
Did
if
we
that was
have that
before. I
before
don't know if
the
that was
actual
before or
body?
after
Doug's
it came
probably
out.
gonna hate
Yeah,
us because we
sorry,
don't
Doug.
remember. Sorry,
We're-
Doug.
You
Don't
guys would
fire us.
know. You guys would know more than me on this one. But I read a story and I watched like a small like documentary of sorts on this. But back in I want to say it was like the 20s or 30s, there was a Bigfoot body that was like discovered and frozen in a block of ice that somebody was parading
Yeah.
around at like carnivals and stuff like that. That they
Yeah.
That's the
determined.
miniature ice man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually saw I saw I don't know if you know who Ken Gerhardt is. I'm sure you do actually because
I know the name. Yeah.
he's the guy with the cool hat. He lives in
Yeah.
Texas.
Him,
Yeah.
there's two of them, him and Lyle Blackburn, who's a
Yeah.
musician too.
But anyway, I just saw Ken speak up in Washington State
Mhm.
at the Watch Fest conference, and he went over the whole entire story, and
Hmm.
ultimately, it's fake.
Yeah, I thought that they
Mhm.
debunked it, and then like somebody
Mhm.
said there was a real one, but like of course then the conspiracy comes in that they
Mhm.
replaced it with a fake
Yeah,
one and all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
Doug.
that was his
Yeah, Doug
conclusion.
saw it too, actually, at the carnival. Yeah, because it was in
Yeah.
Minnesota, and it was I guess, well, it could have been the 50s. It had been later because Doug's not that old. So
No.
whenever it was, but yeah,
Mm.
I think it was debunked.
Yeah, it
Got it.
was.
All right.
But
I'll give it a shot.
so then you're definitely floating in the, category of a biological creature.
Yes.
Because, coming from somebody who's, like, studying and into, dogman paranormal stuff, it's kind of interesting how you haven't wanted to connect that. So, that's interesting, right? I mean, you're a woo dude, like a
Well, yeah, maybe.
classic,
I
like,
don't
he's
know.
a paranormal
I don't know
person.
if that's woo, right? I don't
It's
know. How do
not
you consider
woo. I
that,
mean, I don't
Robbie?
know. So, yeah, like, because you're studying mainly ghosts?
I'm into paranormal and cryptozoology and like equally, but I
Okay.
do kind of like lately I flip flop back and forth, but it started with a heavy interest in the paranormal because of some experiences that I've had. And I read a lot of books, historic haunted America, and like stuff like that. And
Mhm.
yeah, but I've seen things where people get hair or like whatever from a Bigfoot, and they test it, and they're like, this is from a creature we haven't discovered yet, and stuff like that. And it's like stuff like that makes you go like, well, this is a real biological like living being that we just can't
Mhm.
find right now, because if these
Mhm.
scientists have hair or blood or whatever samples that they have, and they're running it, and they're like, this DNA shows that could be human, could be primate, but we don't know what it is. Like, okay, then we're talking about a biological creature.
Mhm. Or sometimes I think, and I mean, none of us here are really capable of having this conversation, but I'll throw it out there. About with the DNA. So,
Mhm.
there are probably some laboratories who can only test so much about the DNA. They might look at Bigfoot DNA and be like, it's contaminated with human
Mhm.
Mhm.
DNA. That's going to be there, or this is human DNA, but
Mhm.
they don't have the advanced enough systems to be able to distinguish between primates, or
Yeah.
even distinguish maybe between a Homo sapiens and a Neanderthal.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on, you need to be taking your DNA samples to like a really
Mhm.
reputable and
Yeah.
advanced laboratory,
Yeah.
or you're just not going to get the same. You're not going to get the ultimate, like the perfect results.
Do you guys remember a show called, I think it was called Finding Bigfoot?
Yeah,
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 a little
I
bit.
we
Yeah.
do.
I think
We're
that
yeah.
I think it was that show. I think it was on Discovery where they were doing a documentary and they were inside some kind of cabin in the woods. I can't remember where. And like
And this is fine. But
yeah, there's the
okay.
the hooping and hollering was happening, and then like
Right.
rocks were being thrown, and like stuff was being pounded on. So they put like a board with like nails on it in front of the door.
That was Legend Meets Science, right?
Well, it was Monster Quest.
Monster Quest.
Monster
That
Quest.
was
Yeah.
that was Doug was in that. Doug is the producer of our show. He was in.
He's
the one who
of Monster Quest.
produced
Too,
that
No.
show.
Yeah.
So you guys would know better than me, but didn't like they said something stepped on that board and they tested the DNA, the blood that was on the board, and there was no creature that they'd ever seen or heard of before, something like that?
I think the problem with the board was the blood sample that they pulled from that board had already been there for a period of time.
Yeah, they went back to get it.
And
later.
so it was dried and it was weathered, and there was other hairs in
There's
there
like
as well.
tissue, I think they pulled out of it
Mm.
too.
And so that was the result that they got from the sample, but the sample was not the best sample.
Got it. Yeah,
Mhm.
you can tell I've watched a lot of these shows because they all start to bleed together in my mind. And
that's the best. I love Monster Quest. Yeah. And Finding Bigfoot was awesome too. Like I watched that a lot with my with our youngest son, who's, now gonna be a biologist.
Right. And we're friends with the folks on both shows. So
we are.
They're cool people.
They are cool people. So you've been educating yourself really well in the subject.
I try to.
Time. I don't know how he's time, but
So what we do, because we're running out of time, Robbie. So we do want you to tell the audience how they can follow you.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll start with the podcast because that's the easiest one. It's ABAO Pod across Twitter, X, whatever they call it now, Instagram and Facebook. And you're probably gonna get the most out of everything I have going on if you follow me on Instagram and X. It's Robby_Vegas_official on Instagram. And Robby_Vegas_ on X. And I do the most on Instagram as far as posting flyers, match graphics, highlight reel. I also have my own YouTube channel that I'm not very good at yet, but I'm really trying. And I'm really trying to get that out there. Just, look up Robby Vegas and give me a subscription on that. But definitely follow me on Instagram because in my link tree, I have links to everything. All my music is on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Play, anywhere you can download music, anywhere you can listen to it.
I'm connecting right now.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So how about live performances? I mean, how do they keep up with that too?
Everything will be through my Instagram. I'll tell you where I'm going to be appearing. As far as wrestling goes, I'll be all over the place, and I always put the flyers up and let you know when they're coming up. And as far as live music goes, again, this year especially, I'm really out there with live music. So I push all the flyers and graphics for that also.
Do you ever play and then wrestle near each other, like, back-to-back nights?
Always. I always, it seems 9 times out of 10 when I have a gig, I'm playing and the night after I'll be wrestling.
That's crazy.
What we got to do. We should do it. Yeah. Catch them doing both.
You want to go all the way up to Buffalo area?
Not far.
We have a friend who has a little cottage and she's always like, you should come up.
We'll let you know, Robbie. Maybe we'll come hang out.
That would be pretty cool. Because we're not that far.
No.
I mean, it's like what? 10 hours?
Less than that, yeah.
Okay.
7 hours from here to Buffalo.
Where are you guys
located? He's not in Buffalo, so
We're in southern Delaware.
Oh, okay.
So not like because Delaware's only like that big anyway, but we're like we're like closer to we're close to DC, Philly, Baltimore, but we're like on the water.
You never know too, because with my wrestling schedule, I could come out closer to you guys too. So because I go everywhere.
I'm following you now, so I know where you're going to be. So if you come down here, we'll come check you out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right, Robbie. It was so awesome meeting you. Really super cool. Thank you so much for taking the time and showing everybody how awesome you are.
Well, thank you guys. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate the platform and you guys having me. It's really awesome.
All right, Robbie. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Robbie. Talk soon.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Take care. That was a good show. Yeah. Robbie's super cool.
He is cool.
I love that. I love getting normal people. I mean, not like again, Robbie is not normal. He's got a lot of crazy, exceptional things going on, but he's not a Bigfoot person.
Right.
He's not a researcher, but he had an experience. And or a couple of experiences. And sometimes it's really nice just to get the viewpoint of normal people.
Right. I think it's good. I probably heard him on Tony Merkel's podcast a while back, probably when I first heard his story a couple of years ago. So yeah, I've been.
Here's a question for our viewers, and you can comment below. But what would you do if you had a Bigfoot sighting? Do you think you would be scared and run away and try to get out of the situation? Or do you think you would stay or go toward it in order, to satisfy your curiosity? So you guys can comment below, because I'm super curious to see what everybody thinks, because I would like to think that I would go towards it, or at least stay still and not run. But what about you?
I would hope I'd have toilet paper with me, because I don't know. Guys. Who knows?
Yeah, I would hope you would have toilet paper too.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming to the show, and we'll see you next time.